Hello and welcome to our lecture on World War One. So we talked a lot about World War One last year, particularly the causes of the conflict, the way that it was international, and the countries that were involved. However, last year being World History, we didn't really focus on the American side, so this time we'll look at the United States a bit more in detail. We'll start with the causes of World War One, just as sort of a recap. So, the four primary causes of World War One, and there are so many more causes, but we're gonna really boil it down: militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. So, by militarism, I mean that people were different countries were glorifying war. They were excited about their militaries, and they wanted to use their newly created weapons, their newly created technologies to, sort of intimidate other people. And this is for reasons of imperialism, namely. We'll get there. But yeah, so the new technologies were impressive at the time and were driving the sort of glorification of war. Tanks were new during this time, as were the use of airplanes in war. You'll notice in this picture there are trenches. This was the last war that trenches were used extensively. And yeah, especially in this kind of pattern, the trenches were pretty impressive, but we stopped using them extensively after World War I. A couple of other new technologies: machine guns, tanks with cannons or with guns on them, and gas masks. Gas masks weren't a new thing, but they did become popular in war because of the chemical warfare that was being used against these people. So the second issue, or the second cause, is alliances. So these groups of countries came together and made written alliances to say that if someone attacked us, you'd go to war on our behalf. So all the blue countries signed this, all the countries in red signed this, together. And this area in yellow is the Balkans, and this is where everything's sort of taking place, at least at first. This is the problem area. Third cause is imperialism. There's a competition going on for colonies. As we've talked about a lot, imperialism is really taking off at this point, and powerful countries have colonies. They want to keep those colonies, and they want to secure new colonies. So there were already smaller wars that were over territory, but this was kind of like a big war over territory, particularly the territory in the Balkans. Finally, nationalism is the fourth and final primary cause of World War I. There were French and German border conflicts, which were causing some problems with identity issues, like who fits into what category of country, and get off my land. This is France kind of nationalism. But more importantly, the ethnic nationalism going on in the Balkans. So the Balkans were basically like colonies at the time. They were overruled by different areas. So they started to see themselves as, well, they already did. They already had a common identity that was different than their colonizers. But the nationalism bit is like a pride in this identity. So this idea of ethnic unity and nationalism, this pride in one's nation or in one's ethnicity, really drove this conflict. Okay, so those are the four primary causes. That was a really quick recap, and I want to do a quick recap over Russia's involvement, because this directly impacts our involvement. So Germany, so Lenin at this time, like pre-1917, was not in Russia. He was in exile. And they knew, he wanted to overthrow the government and insert a Bolshevik or communist government. So Germany, knew this, and they found Lenin, and they were like, okay, so let's make a deal. We will help you get back into Russia and then overthrow the Tsar, and then you can take power. And then, for us, you will leave the war. You'll leave, you'll stop competing in this war. And if we look back at this map, Russia's huge. It's just gigantic. And they've got a lot of people, so they were a really important part of the Allied powers. So this was a real threat to the Allies. But this is also exactly what happened. The Germans helped put Lenin back in Russia. Lenin led the Bolshevik Revolution, overthrew the Tsar, and then said, okay, we're out. We're out of the war. So they pulled themselves out of the war. Like I said, this is really problematic for the Allied powers, because as you'll notice here, Russia had more mobilized forces and more total casualties than any of the other allies, including the United States. So they were a really important piece of this conflict. So when they left, when they stopped being part of the conflict, it really put the Allies in a dangerous position. This is where America comes in. So Russia's just left the war. America is still isolationist. So we're like, okay, we're not getting into the war. That's crazy. Even though we have some sort of malleable alliances. So our foreign policy has been dictated by George Washington in his policy of isolationism, saying you should not make hard deals, hard alliances with anyone, as it weakens the country, as well as the Monroe Doctrine, which says that if any European power were to come into America or interfere in America, they would risk war. So America's isolationist. We don't really want to talk to anybody else, and we don't want to be involved in their affairs. And when Wilson tries to get reelected, he campaigns on this promise of not allowing Americans to enter the war, keeping us out of the war. However, the Lusitania was sunk, and this was the first thing that got America involved. Lusitania was a British cruise liner, I suppose, and a German submarine blew it up. It sunk it. The Lusitania was sunk by a submarine, and it killed 130 Americans, as well as 1,000 people total. And most of these people were British, but like I said, we're kind of in an economic alliance with Britain anyway, so we're sort of, that's okay. But the Lusitania did not have military people on it. It was just normal citizens. So Wilson was really uncool with this, and he was like, Germany has to apologize for this. Germany has to not target peaceful ships, and if Germany does this, America won't enter the war. So we're still trying to stay out of the war, but the sinking of the Lusitania sort of says to us, Germany is becoming unruly, and we might have to do something about it. The second thing that happens, and really this pulls us into the war, is the Zimmermann telegram. The Zimmermann telegram it looks like this. It was a combination of numbers that was intercepted and decoded by British code breakers. And they found that this telegram was being sent from Germany to Mexico, and Germany was trying to make a deal with Mexico to say, let's come together and make a war, like together against the United States of America. So we're going to secretly start a war with the United States, and then you can have some of their territory, and we'll have some of their territory, and everything will be great. So the British intercepted this, sort of like proposal, and then they reported it to the Americans. People freaked out. They were like, no, that is really uncool. That is not good at all. At all. So the public was really enraged by this. Wilson was still like, I don't know, maybe we shouldn't enter the war. I don't really want to. This is what my platform was on, but like the people in America were just outraged. They were really upset about it. So it pushed us into the war. Wilson then said, when he, when Congress declared war and he asked Congress to declare war, he said, the world must be safe for democracy. Its peace must be implanted upon the tested foundations of political liberty. So Congress officially declared war on Germany in April of 1917. Then America enters the war. We have very, new soldiers. We hadn't been keeping a super strong army, but we do send over 2.8 million soldiers that have been drafted. And these American troops really, helped the Allies, and it helped make up for Russia leaving. And the American soldiers did help lead these, final offenses in 1918, which was when the war eventually ended. So after the war ended, the countries sat down together, the leaders of the countries sat down together, and were trying to figure out how the heck they were going to put Europe back together. Wilson proposed these 14 points. The plan was intended for long-lasting peace, and the idea was that the Europeans should not punish Germany because Germany would be destitute and then retaliate, leading to a Second World War or something that actually might have totally happened. So Wilson was totally in the right on this one. He did some really horrible things with sedition and Russians and Jews and stuff during and right before World War I. But this was a really good idea. Not punishing Germany to the point where they're totally destitute, because this punishment and leaving Germany totally destitute totally led to World War II. So Wilson was in the right. Here are his 14 points in general. First, open diplomacy. Second, freedom of the seas. Removal of economic barriers. Reduction of armaments. So, take down so many weapons. Stop producing so many weapons. Adjustment of colonial claims. And this did happen. Germany's colonies ended up becoming British colonies. So that's why Tanzania was a German colony and became a British colony. So they restored territory, they redrew frontiers, they redivided area, and they created the Association of Nations, which would then fall apart, but then be reestablished as the UN, the United Nations. So those were his 14 points. But Europe was nah, that's cool. We don't want to do that. So instead they signed the Treaty of Versailles. Germany was really left sort of in the dust by this. They were forced to accept the full responsibility for the war. They lost all of their territories. They had to pay reparation payments. So lots and lots of money in increments to the Allies, which they actually just finished paying off, I think, in 2017. So yeah, I mean, like that's 100 years, almost 100 years later. And finally, Germany can't have like a very strong military. And this was what was laid out by the Treaty of Versailles. None of this really worked, and it really did cause World War II. And we'll talk about that more later. But that was pretty much the extent of America's involvement in World War One. But the final thing that it did was that it put us as the Americans as in a position of power. We became through this an international power, which we were not before because of our isolationist ideals. So we're going to talk more about this in class, how we became a superpower, why, and what that means for us then and now, and for our identity now. And we'll tie that in with World War II and 9/11 and how we are right now. If you have any questions, please let me know. Please send me an email, or we can talk about it in class. I'll see you guys soon. Bye.